I want to ask you about the character part too. It just seems from this that, in fact, there's not really potential to influence that, and I guess the risk is that a lot of our character areas, are going to have a lot of, for example, nice old villas.
Can I interrupt just for a minute?
Okay.
And can I say that the letter was written to me, so I assume that I'm going to be writing the letter in reply. It will be
with the responses
written in my name.
attached.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm assuming
Yeah.
so.
So I am going to get some oversight on that, and if the smaller group wants to be involved in that, I'm very happy. Yep.
Thank you. Some areas, for example, and Summerfield is just one example in the city, where there's some lovely old villas, but what potentially is going to happen now is that there'll be at least 2-storey buildings can be built right beside them or even all around them if a developer chooses.
This is to do with Sam's.
Yeah, in the research that we did into these upzone areas, we've excluded the special amenity areas.
Yeah. Which never had any legal teeth anyway, did it?
Some did, some didn't.
Okay.
Some had rules related to them in terms of amenity in the operative plan. Some didn't. And the special amenity areas are going to be reviewed collectively as part of phase 2 as well.
So that's sort of like will be the only restraint to protect those sort of semi-heritage type areas.
Heritage as a whole is part of the second phase, and that's why we've also delayed looking at the SAMS areas, because that's in relation to character and heritage as well. So that's not a part of these comments.
Yeah, Ali? No.
Will be addressed when staff come down, but just so that we're on the same page, I guess what the bit that I need to know about is with the optimisation program and investigation on that, where there is the possibility some work that is not urgently required in someone's opinion will be put off. Will that mean that some of the infrastructure wouldn't take the amount of intensification that it would otherwise should that infrastructure be repaired to stand?
I think that's a reasonable question to ask, whether, given the state of our infrastructure in some areas, whether that would put too much pressure on what is a constrained infrastructure at the moment, and we're going to assume that the constraint is temporary, not permanent. So, and that's why we need some engineering advice to support that. I think, though, it would be useful just to remind councillors that there are a whole lot of provisions in our current district plan that enable intensification, but it hasn't occurred.
That's correct.
Because not everyone is required to double the number of properties, that they have. Like, so if somebody is taking down a house as a result of the earthquake, or even not as a result of the earthquake, the way I see it, if you do it now, you can put back 2. Not everyone's going to do that.
That's exactly right. And
not everyone's going to see this as, an opportunity to intensify. And a lot of people won't want to have a neighbouring property on their own. Some may, put 2 units on and then sell up altogether and buy a house somewhere else. But others won't have the wherewithal to do that. So, although it looks like there are numbers on paper, there are numbers on paper already. So we already had the amount. Well, how many people... If everyone intensified to the level that they were able to, what was the figure that we came up with? It was over 20,000 now.
It is.
The figures I read out before were based on very conservative percentages, like 20% of the available or 5% of the available. If the theoretical maximum was taken up, I think you'd need to triple the size of Christchurch.
Yeah. So.
That's correct. The rights that are established through a zone is only to enable people to use them if they want to.
Yeah.
They're not required to do that.
Yeah.
And that's something that we can't do in the district plan. We can make land available for people to take up these rights if they wish to, but
Yep.
we can't force people to build houses.
No. Yanni?
That's a really important statistic that needs to be put in here, is under the current district plan, the spare capacity we have, the theoretical maximum, whatever you want to call it, the total number of houses that could be built as of right, if we do nothing, is 50,000 in the next, or whatever that figure is, because we seem to be making these changes to intensify on the basis that just zoning more land will encourage intensification, when actually, it hasn't even worked with our existing zones. So it seems like it's a really good counter to the idea that we just keep developing on greenfields, developing on brownfields, and reducing zoning requirements.
Well,
if we can actually show,
if we
this is the
hadn't
capacity.
had such a massive amount of greenfield development, then maybe the brownfield and
That's right.
intensification
And it would be more
provisions would
sustainable.
work. But anyway, they haven't. But the point is, we legally have to change these. So
those simple statistics, just in terms of the number of, if people wanted to use their full development rights at the moment with the existing city plan, or the proposed district plan, what could they have?
In terms of the proposed, I think we can probably put together some
Because-
high levels. That would need to, in the time we have available, they would be high level.
Yeah, but I mean,
But that
if
would
government's
be
saying we need
no,
to
I
create more
think this
land,
came out during the hearings on
It
the district plan review early on in the piece, that somebody had a figure, if we actually intensified now to what we could do, but it did include the central city, which this doesn't.
No.
But if we intensified to what we could do under the existing plan, what would that number be? And I thought it was about 20-something thousand extra properties.
22 or 24,000 comes
Yeah,
to
or
mind, but
something.
we do
But
have those
let's
figures.
find out what it is, because I think it's worthwhile reminding people that just because the plan allows it to happen doesn't mean there is going to be wholesale intensification in the areas.
and I think showing the gap, the difference between what the existing plan does and the proposed plan does is really important to counter the minister's arguments.
In another way, the land availability report that comes to you quarterly indicates how many sites there are available, and yet how few subdivision consents, building consents and resource consents we actually have underway to get those houses on board. It's a similar type of argument too.
Yeah.
I just want to caution on
Yeah.
that though, because that could also be used against the argument, because they could say, well, that's why we need to intensify, allow intensification right across the board, because only a certain amount will come up and be. So we're just going to be careful how we actually.
No, but I'm not opposed to intensification. I actually personally, from a city perspective, it's actually better than the expansion way out.
I agree with that, but I'm talking. We don't want developments in areas where we've got some high amenity and that gets lost.
Yeah, and we also don't want developments where we've got constraints on our infrastructure, and I think that's a very good point that's been raised. Ali?
Just wanted to address the point about we can do most of this or a lot of this already. I think it's reasonable for people to expect that the infrastructure, regardless of whether it is taken up by people or not, can manage what is going to happen in our city.
I totally agree.
Yeah, and
which is why we have to get that information.
Yeah, but also too, I think it's different from having it there to be able to be done anyway, and now being in an environment where it is being actively encouraged to be done. So I think that's important. People may not take it up, but we're in a different environment now, and people will be encouraged to do this.
This looks like we have engineering advice.
Such as it is. So I'm Bridget O'Brien, I'm the Senior Planning Engineer for Growth for Water and Wastewater. Unfortunately, I don't know...
You all need to speak right into the
sorry. Unfortunately, I don't know that I can give you much in the way of answers because I've only been in the job for 4 weeks. But I can hear what you've got to say, and I can go and try and find out as much as I can while the meeting carries on, and then come report back, if that's all right.
Yeah. So I think that the core issue is that we've got areas that have been very badly damaged in the earthquake, like Shirley, which is the subject to this new residential density modification. I think got the words slightly wrong there. To allow intensification near a key activity centre, which obviously is the palms and the services and bus stops that surround that. So the question is with the review of the SCIRT work program and the horizontal infrastructure generally, obviously there's going to be some consideration given to whether we, how much of the network gets repaired, and do the constraints that exist at the moment, do they represent a longer term constraint, and would they necessarily delay the implementation of this proposed zone on this area? What I'm trying to say is are the constraints that exist at the moment because the underground horizontal infrastructure hasn't been fully repaired, will that make a difference to the time frame for when this area could in fact sustain increased intensification?
I'll have to find out.
And Madam Chair, I'll supply also this chart that we referred to on page 188 and the numbers for Shirley.
Yeah.
And we'd also need to advise that these numbers are within a certain time frame, like the next 20 years. Is it 20 years or 35? Anyway, we will make sure that the full picture is understood.
Yeah. Yep, Pauline?
700 and Shirley, is that just the Housing New Zealand
No.
program? It's outside of that, is it? Is it additional to?
That's right.
Thank you.
Yanni?
In terms of the engineering stuff, the thing I'm really interested in is that we heard the other day that there's been a freeze on fixing our water pressure mains. So they're not being fixed anymore, and we've got more leaks than we've ever had in recent history. So I'd really like to know around the Linwood area, where we're seeing just stagnant ponding happening in the curb and channels, what's happening in terms of the capacity of that infrastructure to deal with the intensification that's being proposed.
So it's Shirley and Linwood. Yep. Yeah, Barrington's separate. I mean, they have to prove that the infrastructure is there to support that under the enhanced development mechanism anyway. So we're not proposing that for the what's it called? The RMD.
I mean, it leads to the question, which is perfectly normal in planning terms, is that you actually stage development after the infrastructure is put in, and in this case, it probably is something that we need to think about. Once it's repaired, then you allow the intensification to occur. But up until that point, it seems pretty counterproductive.
Linwood's not being proposed for this either. So
Linwood is getting a huge amount of intensification.
Linwood is not proposed for the RDM. It is being proposed, RMD, sorry. It's being proposed for Shirley. So it's the Shirley one that we're interested in.
Madam Chair, can I make a comment, please?
Yep.
And that is that the Minister's comments only allow for further intensification, not less. So if this is an issue that we find through engineers is potentially going to be a problem,
we may have to make a submission
that's
on
correct.
it. Yeah.
Yes.
So let's leave it as it is. But so that means that there is no need to come back today. There isn't any need to come back today with the response on the engineering, because we couldn't take Shirley out, so we haven't got the ability to do that.
We don't have the mandate to make that change.
But we would want to have that information to inform our submission, which is in the very near future. So we would need that.
It says revisit the analysis behind the decisions to upzone with a view to include a more realistic market-based assessment of the development potential of sites and a more realistic estimate of available development capacity. So I actually think we do have scope within the Minister's recommendation. What he's saying is we want you to review the assumptions behind this, and clearly if the infrastructure can't support it with the EDMs, then clearly that's something that we should be considering. But
I accept the advice that we've received, that that doesn't mean that. So
just in terms of the residential areas, the only other question I have was around height limits. I'm not sure if you cover that later on. Did the Minister... So,
Sorry, well, yeah, it is on our list of suggested changes. We're doing the no changes at this stage, so we'll move through to the changes.
The height has some modifications. Similarly, issues of quantity of assessment matters in urban design, those are with slight modifications, so we'll do that in the next round. Currently, we're focusing on no change matters.
So is there anything else on the no change matter on this particular issue?
On residential?
We'll move on to the
I think
next.
we're moving on to the
Next one?
changes.
Okay.
Yeah.